are live. Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. Give this a second. I know I'm live on my YouTube, so I'm just going to give this a few seconds, minutes, maybe wait for a couple people to get on here. I didn't really advertise this, so it wouldn't surprise me if absolutely nobody showed up on here today, because that was bad marketing on my part. See if I am live on my Facebook. I should be live. I swear to God. Fucking, hi guys. Tell me who's here. I need a media person. I need a media person. This bullshit with Facebook pisses me off. God, there I am. Cool. All right. All right, so, damn it. I really wish this would work better. Anyway. I was gonna go live on my, my fan page, but that didn't really work. So, yeah, leave me your messages or questions, and we'll just kind of go from here. I'm going to go back and forth between my StreamYard and my accounts, because I don't always get your messages. So anyway, it's been quite a while since I've done a live, and I do apologize for that. But you know what? A girl gets burnt the fuck out, guys. It's the truth. It's the truth. Okay. So what I'm going to do today is I'm actually going to do a live. I swear that's just, it looks not crooked. I'm going to do a live episode. So today I'm going to cover the torso killer. And this was spanning from 1967 to 1980. But that is a lie, because he was killing people, I want to say starting at like 21 to 23 years old. And he has even admitted that he has probably killed over 100 people. That's pretty goddamn wild if you ask me. So it's pretty bonkers. So his name is Richard Francis Cottingham, aka the New York Ripper, or aka the Torso Killer. This happened in New Jersey, obviously Times Square, New York, all that kind of stuff. And his crimes are absolutely atrocious. What he did and how he did this was total crazy train city. Just absolutely fucking crazy. I will say right now that this is not intended for minors. This is an 18 and older thing. There's going to be some pretty graphic detail here. So if you are not 18 or older, go the fuck away. People coming in and out. I'm not really going to start this until there's people here. So, well, maybe. Fuck it. I'm just going to do it. Why not? All right. So Richard was born on November 25th in 1946. And this was in Mott Haven, Bronx, New York City. He was the first of 4 children, and he had 3 sisters, which I find it's weird to me when you end up finding out that like the serial killers, especially the men, they had like a dozen sisters and they go off to kill however many women, right? And it's like, were they mentally like attacking their sisters or what? But it's nuts. Kind of, we know that a lot of people ended up going and basically attacking their mothers through other people. So in 1948, his family moved to Dumont, New Jersey, and that was, and then to Rivervale, New Jersey in 1956. And Richard graduated from Pascack. I'm sorry, I don't know the names over there. Pascack Valley High School in 1964. So here's where I think things started to get crazy, and this is where I really think he started. I think he started killing people when he was maybe even 20, because one of his youngest victims. Sorry, I do have to go through my notes here because there is a lot to cover on him. Like I said, crazy train. Yeah, he says that he was 21 years old when he committed his first crime, but he got 2 girls who were high schoolers. And this was in 1974. And I just wonder, like, did they know him? Yeah, I mean, he was a big guy. He is a big guy. Richard is still alive. Anyway, scroll. So after he graduated, Rich worked for the Metropolitan Life, where his father was the vice president of the firm. This was on Madison Avenue in New York. And he started in the mailroom and literally worked his way up to becoming a mainframe computer operator after taking computer courses. So way to better yourself, right? It was in October of 1966 where he became a computer operator for Blue Cross Blue Shield. Yes, that one. In New York until his apprehension in 1980. So he worked for the same company from 1966 all the way to 1980 and was literally committing horrible crimes from the very beginning to the very end. That's a long time to be doing what he was doing. like crazy. That's a really long time. So coincidentally, Richard worked in an office with another fugitive. This was serial killer Rodney Alcala, known as the dating game killer. And this is while he was living in New York in 1969 under the alias of John Berger, but it was B-E, not Burger E. Neither man has claimed to know about the other, even though that they were really doing similar crimes. So that's really kind of funny when you think about it. So it's here we have some possible preemptive attempts that could have been and could have totally changed the course of this case. See, Richard was arrested several times on lesser charges from 1969 to 1974. This is stupid crazy. So at the time of his arrest, people were not even aware of a serial killer in the New York area. Like, they had no idea yet. And this is because he would, one, grab his victims from New York and take them over to the New Jersey side. But also, as I've covered before on the Times Square, my Times Square episode on my YouTube is basically it's covering the acronym of NHI, and NHI means non-human involved, and they would use this acronym for prostitutes, people of color, drug addicts, homeless, but the police would use this acronym on people that they just didn't feel were worth their time. And if that had not been the case, this probably wouldn't have gone as far as it did. But it was used, and they literally would stamp it on the file and throw it in the bottom of some forgotten filing cabinet, and that was that. And that's pretty disgusting and horrible. So it was on October 3rd, 1969, Richard was arrested, charged, and convicted of drunk driving in New York and only sentenced to a $50 fee. And basically was like, don't do it again. He paid the fee. But he literally drove up onto a sidewalk and almost killed masses of people. It was like, if that were to happen now, like, they would throw away the key. And then on August 21st, 1972, he was charged, convicted, of shoplifting at Stern's department store in Paramus, New Jersey. And again, sentenced to either a $50 fee or 10 days in jail. He paid the fine. And from everything I saw on this, it was the stupidest thing that he stole, because he had the money in his pocket to pay for it. And I think he stole a can of wasp spray. Like, a can of wasp spray? Are we for real right now? A can of fucking wasp spray. Like, what? Okay. Cool story. This is where his arrest got a little bit more severe, and it was in September 4th, 1973, where Richard was arrested in New York for robbery, sodomy, and sex abuse. On a sex worker and her pimp. However, neither one of them showed up to court, and the trial was completely dismissed. And that was it. Here's the fucking crazy part. She was severely bitten, R word, sodomized, and she was 17 years old. But again, because she was a sex worker, had the acronym of NHI, they didn't fucking care. They gave two shits. They gave less than two shits. They did not care. This was nuts to me. You have a minor who was severely raped, beaten, all these horrible things, and they're like, And then March 12th, 1974, he was arrested again in New York City for robbery, unlawful imprisonment. That's kidnapping, y'all. And this was also on the complaint of a sex worker. And again, she did not show up to court because, guys, if they did, those victims would have been arrested and charged with prostitution solicitation. So they knew that if they showed up to court, that they were screwed. So again, this case was dismissed. And we'll put this back into some perspective here. She was handcuffed, beaten, raped, and she was 19 years old. What? Okay. In October of 73, his first male child was born, and he had already gotten away at this point with several crimes, and he was already murdering people at this point in time. He's already gotten away with many severe crimes. And then after those 2 dismissals in court, it kind of just leads you to think that he was probably feeling pretty invincible. And the fact that he had been getting away with this for almost a decade at this point in time, a decade. It's pretty nuts. And then in 76, his 3rd child was born. And here, this is where I think he could no longer maintain the sexual relationship with his wife. And he even moved into the basement of their home, keeping a padlock on the door most of the time. And it was here that his wife, Janet, discovered his trophy room. And to her shock and horror, she found this room to be filled with costume jewelry and, hey, Angie. Oh, hi, babe. I am talking about Richard Cottingham. He is the torso killer. And so I have my thing called The Secrets of Sex, and I cover a lot of historical sex, basically, and it shows that basically how sex has transformed and shaped society. But also in my series, I cover serial killers who are based off of sex, which is damn near all of them. So I'll be covering a lot. And today I just had a wild hair up my bum, and I was like, you know what? Let's go live. It's being recorded. And whoever joins, but I'm here and I'm glad to see you. That's really cool. So Richard Cottingham was known as the torso killer. He was also known as the New York Ripper. And he spanned his crimes in the New York areas spanned from 1967 to 1980. But that's a complete lie when you go through the rabbit hole of researching this person. He literally committed his first murder when he was probably 21 years old. And that was, I want to say, in 1966, 1967, maybe, right? 1966. Yeah. So he was literally out there massacring people from the age of 21, 1967 to 1980. Fucking crazy. And then he was also arrested several times for some really stupid crimes. And he just got a slap on the wrist, $50 fines. One of his crimes was literally getting in a car drunk off his mind and driving up onto the sidewalk where he almost killed masses of people right then and there, and literally slap on the wrist, $50 fine or 10 days in jail. He decided to pay the fine. It was nuts. And then he unlawfully held, which is kidnapping, 2 women. Well, not women. One was a minor. She was 17 years old, and she was a sex worker. And that's where this acronym of NHI comes into play, which is no human involved. And this was used well up into the 90s by law enforcement when it came down to sex workers, homeless, druggies, minorities, really anybody that they deemed less. They would give them that acronym. And when a crime was committed against them, they would just stamp it on the file and put it in some forgotten little filing cabinet, never to be seen again. I just did an episode on that for Times Square on my YouTube, and it's pretty horrifying. It's pretty horrifying because the amount of Jane Does that there are in this country in the span from the 60s to the 90s alone from the acronym of an NHI is one of the most just diabolical things that I think anyone ever could do anywhere. Because you're a sex worker, you don't matter. Because you've done drugs and you're in a really bad place, you don't matter. Because you're homeless, you don't matter. Because you're a person of color, you don't matter. Get the fuck out of here. It was just, it's fucking insane to me. So he was sick. And this guy is sick. So now we are to 1976. Richard was married. They had had their 3rd child. And it was at this point where Richard could just not contain his relationship with his wife anymore. He couldn't contain it anymore. He wasn't really even sexually attracted to her at this point in time because of the atrocities he was committing against all these poor women out there. And she had always looked the other way. She had always just been very quiet and, okay, you do you. Yeah. That's rough. I feel for him. I really do. I feel for your uncle. That's a hard job. What a guy. Because that's something right there. Wow. Kudos to him. So Janet, his wife, she finally, no one cares. No one cares. It's like they're just trash. They've been thrown away. And they've been thrown away. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Big one right there. I will be covering some stuff about what happens there. And it's harsh, to say the very least. So Janet discovers his trophy room. And this is the place where he has been basically living. He would come home, hi kids, go down to the basement, lock the door. And this was his trophy room. He had costume jewelry. He had clothes. He had shoes, handbags, keys. He had bondage collars, straps, and other sex toy items. He had a male wig, a bottle of scotch, handcuffs, all sorts of different types of BDSM restraints. For the time being, she kept really quiet about this because she was a good Catholic wife. And, this was the time of ride or die, man. They kept their mouth shut. And a lot of people later on have some really harsh things to say about her. And because of the type of woman I am, I will stand up for anybody and I'll protect people, and especially people who cannot protect themselves. So I can understand loving your husband, but at this time they didn't have, there was nothing there. There's no connection here. So I have a hard time with how quiet she kept, and finding this kind of thing. You could think that maybe this is his fetish. Okay? Like maybe this is his fetish, and oh my God. And she was Catholic. They're raised a certain way. So I that's a hard one for me. That's a hard one for me. So by this time, what is it, 76? He has become just indispensable at his job. He could clock in and clock out as he wished. And also, he forged the books, manipulating his hours against his crimes. He was a computer genius. I mean, he went to school for this. He worked his way up to becoming this person. And he knew how to mess around with the computer systems to make it look like I'm here and then I'm not here, right? And his co-workers knew that he did this, but nobody really said anything about him because they were like, man, he's an odd duck. This guy's he's really strange. And some of the guys were scared of him because he was big. Richard is a big guy. And back then he was a strapping dude, you know, he was a strapping dude. Later on, when I go through and do this as a regular episode, I will be putting pictures and stuff up of Richard, and you can see what he looked like from a younger age all the way up into now, because as far as I know, Richard's still alive in prison, by the way, forever and ever. So this point is 1976. This is where Richard starts stealing from his coworkers, and not just petty things. He would steal the keys to their house and then literally go to their home and steal things from their house, such as cameras and God knows what else. And he also had a really, really lively gambling habit, and he was loan sharking on the side. And that was very, very extensive. It was said by his coworkers that he used to brag about his activities and how he could go out and literally do anything he wanted. He would openly discuss vices such as his S&M clubs that he would go to all the time, how he could pick up any prostitute, his gambling. He often carried $3,000 on him at all times. This was in the fucking 70s. You know how much money that was back then? What is that comparative to? Like, you could buy a house for like $10,000 to $15,000, isn't that right? In the 70s, you could buy a car, a brand spanking new car, for $3,000. That's comparative to having like $13,000. That's, say, a Kia. Right? Kias, well, I don't even know now because I don't look at cars at this moment, and inflation is insane. So maybe not. But when you think about a brand spanking new Kia goes for what? 13? It's basically carrying $13,000 on your goddamn person at all times. Insane. Holy crap. So he would also tell them how he would take prostitutes from Manhattan all the way to New Jersey. He told his coworkers this, and that he could get anyone. He could get any woman walking on the streets because all he had to do was pull out that fucking wad of $3,000, and they would be like, "Oh shit, we got a player, we got a baller," because again, you're talking about a roll of cash that's 13 fucking grand, right? Fuck, what? He would also brag about how he would get these working girls, take them over to New Jersey, have his way with them. This was the ones that he didn't murder. And then he would, skadoozle without paying them. And oftentimes he would take their clothes. He would take their wallets, and he would make sure that they were stuck in the room completely naked with none of their belongings. And what do? How embarrassing. And that was another thing that he liked to do. He liked to be able to control and humiliate them. What a piece of shit. Was he attractive? He tomato, I guess. He wasn't ugly. He wasn't an ugly man, but he wasn't, it's so hard for me to say, because to me, I'd have been like, eh. But to you, he could be. And when you're a sex worker, you go where the money is. That's right. You go where the money is. So when you have somebody with a wad of money coming at you, you're going to go and yes, you're the most handsome, attractive thing in the whole world because they got money. So a lot of the women found him attractive enough. And they also were like, oh, he's got money. He's really attractive. Or he is attractive. He's easy on the eyes. Oh, well, yeah, sure. We'll go. To their demise, So it's believed that the final killing spree started in 1977. And to be honest, I don't believe this. I don't believe it. Like the final killing spree, right? He started when he was 21 years old. Okay. You have and it could have even been 20. Okay. So from 1966, 1967, that was Nancy. I can't say her middle name. Shiava Vogel. She was a 29-year-old woman. She was married. She was a mother of 2. And she was last seen the 3 days before her body was found. And Nancy was found in a parking lot in New Jersey. And then you have 1968, Diane Cusick, 23. You have July 1968, Jacqueline Harp. She was 13 years old. And like I said, he's a big guy. He could easily just like snatch up some of these women. This was the other thing. A lot of these women were fucking tiny. They were like 5 foot, 5'1", 5'2", 5'3". He was like he's like 6 foot. He's a big dude compared to these little tiny things. A lot of these girls only weighed like 95 fucking pounds. It's fucking disgusting. You have Irene Blaze. She was 18. That was in 1969. You have a double sexual assault and homicide. And this one, they're saying that he drowned them. And this was 2 girls at the same time. It was Lorraine Kelly, who was 16, and Mary Pryor, who was 17, August 1974. So in December of 1977, Richard went back to his old apartment building. And this is where it's really crazy. And you would really think that police would have kind of been like, this makes sense. Because he took victims from there. He took victims back to there and dropped them in his old apartment complex building. Jesus, fuck. So here he encountered a tenant, a pretty young 26-year-old nurse named Mary Carr. She was 5'5" and 115 pounds. And okay, Richard was 5'11". There you go. So he was almost 6 foot. And he was muscular and 220 pounds. That is a big damn difference. You know, that's a big difference. And it's important to note here that he had a previous affair with a nurse. So while he's been married to his wife all these years, he had been having an affair and affairs with other women. Now, he didn't, I think there's one of those women that he ended up homiciding. It's also common pop culture for the time that they looked at promiscuity as nurses, flight attendants, and then of course prostitutes, right? Sex workers. But flight attendants and nurses were associated with high sexual promiscuity. So even if she wasn't promiscuous, and who fucking cares if she was, she doesn't deserve what happened to her, you know? He took her to the Quality Inn motel and left her body in the parking lot in New Jersey. He left her between a car and a chain link fence, and that's how she was found. She was wearing her nurse's uniform, and her pant leg was cut open with a knife. A clump of her hair was cut off and placed on her thigh. And there were shallow cut marks across her chest and feet, with deep marks left behind her wrists and ankles from the handcuffs, which he took from the scene. There were traces of white adhesive around her mouth from the tape that he had used on all of the victims that are associated within this time. She had very angry bruises across her face, arms, shoulders, and thighs, and breasts from being severely beaten. And her left breast had a very deep bruise on it from being bitten. Richard also bit many of his victims. Yeah, Rachel, oh my God, babe, I miss you so much. Love you. I cannot wait till you come home. He also took this victim's, Marianne's, he took her apartment keys. Now, what the hell did he do? I wonder if he went back to her apartment. I wonder if he did a number of times before she was found within that 3-day span. And I wonder if he, I just wonder like what he did. Because he was sick. He did some sick shit. I also want to say that, I come out with some opinions here. I say how I feel. I often laugh sometimes, and it's just due more to release tension and I give utmost respect to all the victims. I feel so badly for all of their families. So by no means take anything disrespectful. So this was the second murder of the spree, what they call, not the overall span of what he did, because as I have said before, Richard claims to have killed over 100 people, including he did kill a couple of men. And so here is where we can't say that this is the spree. It's not. This is the end of his era. This is where he starts losing control, because he starts, we start out with this slow, I call this like the burnout. We start with the slow burnout where he actually controls how and when and the time period between, but then it gradually intensifies, and it's more and more and more and more up until he got caught. Because I just think he was just burning so much, and this sickness just took over him, and he just could not control himself anymore. So this is the one, Nancy. Nancy is the one that I told you about before. The mother of two. She was married. Richard claims that they had been having an affair, that they had been fooling around, and that he killed her because she became too possessive over him. He was questioned by police. So what? We have 4 arrests, 4 charges, 2 convictions, 2 dismissals, and he was questioned in this one. And again, it was like, oh yeah, sure, on your way. No, she was promiscuous slut. You guys were having an affair, okay. But they always look at the, it fucking makes, I'm just, what the fuck? What the fuck? So March 22nd, 1978, 22-year-old Karen Schilt, a petite waitress, had finished a shift at Tuesdays and had 2 drinks. And then she was heading home, where she stopped at another bar to have another drink with some of her friends. And this is where Cottingham approached her, buying her a drink, and asked if she was a working girl. And as they were talking, he brought her another drink. And then upon consuming it, she started to feel the room spin. She was losing her balance. She got very dizzy. And then she decided, man, it's time to get the fuck out of here, man. Jesus. Well, it left her staggering out into the dark. And who would come to save the day? She tried to make her way to her apartment, which was walking distance. She felt herself losing consciousness and realized, holy shit. And then who shows up? That Mr. Friendly from the bar. And she's so relieved because, oh my God, he's going to help me. And he offers her a ride to the apartment. And slick as butter, he had her in that car, in the front seat, and that was it. So she groggily regains a foggy consciousness. She saw that they were on Route 80. They're headed to New Jersey, miles and miles away from her apartment. That was literally yards away from her. And that's when Richard shoves a red and blue pills down her throat, and she passes out again. So poor Karen, she was found alive. This was the next day, behind a car next to a fence in a parking lot of an apartment complex where Mary Ann Carr had been taken. We're connecting these dots. We're connecting them. Here they are. Fuck. Karen's shirt had been pulled up, exposing her breasts. Her pants had been pulled all the way down below her knees. She had scratches on her breasts, and her left breast had been burned with a cigarette and deep bite marks. Her legs and arms were also deeply bruised, and her body overall had been badly, badly beaten. And all she could remember was a burning sensation on her breast, and her attacker called himself Schaefer. He brutally sexually assaulted her and really beat her within an inch of her life. And he literally told her that he used to live where he had dumped her body. So upon toxicology, seconal sodium and amytal sodium barbiturates were found in her system, which is consistent with a central nervous depressant. And this is typically called Tuinal, and it's highly soluble in water and alcohol. So it's like dissolves. You can't see it in the glass. And it was a very, very popular date rape drug of the time because it often wiped the memory. So it was basically your original roofie, you know. It's fucking scary. Her purse, coat, scarf, and silver ring were taken, and she told, she told police that, like, he looked like everybody else. He just looked like this average guy. So he didn't stand out. There's nothing overly impressive about him or odd or, you know, like, he just looks like this normal average person. I can't tell you how fucked up. So this is what I mean by that burn, guys, is like March 22nd, 1978, October 28th, 1978. Okay. This is where Susan Geiger is a 19-year-old prostitute standing at a tiny 5 foot tall and 96 pounds. That's like, you know, everyone wants to believe that would never happen to me. That would never happen to me. That would never happen to me. And we all like to think that we're capable. You know, but man, even if he hadn't have drugged these women who would put up a fight, but that was the thing. It was just total control. He drugged them. There's no way that you can fight that. As much as you would want to, and as, you know, there's no way. There's no way. And even this one, even if he hadn't have done the things that he did, it was just, she was 96 pounds. Fuck. Poor thing, you know. So she was approached by him, and she, you know, told him, I'm booked for the night, and you know, call me later. So he did. Tell me that's not some premeditation, you know? Fuck. He picked her up outside of a Burger King at midnight. He drugged her and took her to the airport motel in New Jersey. Somewhere along the way, she gained enough consciousness to spell out the word Thunderbird, which was on the dash of the car. And she also recalls waking up to Richard having sex with her and beating her with a green rubber hose. And when she regained consciousness, it was mid-afternoon on October 12th. No, that's not right. 29th. And she was in room 28. She had been beaten, cut upon her face, her mouth, her legs, her nethers, all of it. All of it. And there were, again, deep, deep bite marks on her right breast. There was seminal fluid that was found on the towels in the hotel room with a type O blood secretor, and DNA at this point in time was not a thing. I don't think, I think it's like 1980, 1981 where DNA came a thing. And he took her purse. He also ripped her earrings out of her ears instead of, you know, like, you've just, there's like these things, dude. It's like you've already beaten her and you've already done all this really horrible thing. Like, he ripped her earrings out from her ears. And the same drugs that he had used on the other victim were found on Susan. And the police investigator at this point noticed that some of her nails were missing, and her when he came into the room, he was literally like, oh my God, it was like the worst beating he had ever seen, because he said that her lips looked like those Halloween wax things that kids use, you know, the big lips. Like that was how badly he had just beaten her. So on Thursday, November 29th, we're having a month later. So he went from March to October. Now it's October to November. We have just a month. Cottingham was checking into okay, this is where things get, okay. I'm trigger warning, guys. Trigger fucking warning. This is where the Times Square murder happens, and this is very graphic. It's really horrible. I'm just FYIing. So this is where Richard checks into the Travel Inn Motor Hotel. He gave an address and a name of Carl Wilson of Anderson Place, Merlin, New Jersey. And in those days, you didn't have to give them your ID to verify who you were. You just said, hey, you know, I'm John Smith. I live down the road. That was it. And when police questioned staff, all they could remember was a white guy with sandy hair standing at about 5'10", 5'11", in his 30s. That was it. There was only one person who said that he gave her like a really chill, creepy vibe. But again, that he was non-remarkable. He looked like everybody else. And for the 3-night stay, he hung a do not disturb sign on his door. Of course you would. Because of course you would. In his carry bag, he had handcuffs, gags, restraints, and a fucking hacksaw. This wasn't a trip that he did not plan on doing some bodily mayhem to somebody or persons. You know, this wasn't like, oh yeah, I'm going out and it's going to be a party and I'm going to, you know, like, no, let's find some bitches and hack them up. That's what he went there thinking. This fucker, dude. So after he settled in, he went hunting. And this is where he lured 2 sex workers from Times Square separately to his room. He flashed his fucking wad of money and offering them a big payday, and came across a very naive and charming, or he came across as very naive and charming. That's the other thing, is like he just came off as this like geek, you know. But when you look at his pictures, I'm like, he doesn't look like a geek, you know? But that's I don't know. And the way he came across was just, it was very disarming. So the working girls were like, yeah, sure. So this is where Dita Gazari comes into play. And later on, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what her daughter has done, which is just what a woman, what a person, because what she has done is pretty amazing, and then one identified woman. So we still have a Jane Doe to this day. Never ever been found. Well, I'll get there. So, okay. He picked them up, And what he had said was that he picked up Dita, and then he picked up the unidentified, our Jane Doe. And then when they got back to the room, he was like, we're going to party. Right. And this is where he drugged them, severely sexually assaulted them. He cut them underneath their breasts, but no penetrating wounds were present. Like he didn't stab them. This was one of those things where he made sure that what he did to them was going to hurt. And he terrorized them for 12 hours. And he made it very clear to them that this was going to get worse. And yes, he also bit them. This, to me, is where the tide changes for Richard. This was front page news. Front page news. And sex worker or not, this could not be shuffled away. You couldn't hide this. At 9:30 a.m., a fireman bust in the door when staff saw that there was smoke coming out of the room. So they bust in the door and waiting, they're running in. They see that there's bodies laying, like one's on the ground and one's on the bed. And they run in to do CPR, only to find, to their fucking horror, that both of the women's heads and hands had been removed. So after he had done all this really horrendous shit, he lit the area on fire. So this was, massive. This was massive. This was not only covered in New York. This was across the country. Everybody knew about this. This was not one of those things. They could not place an NHI on these two victims. They could not say that. They couldn't say that they didn't matter, because everybody knew. There was no hiding this. This was not going to go away. So he calms down. And it was May 5th, 1980, when 19-year-old Valerie Ann Street was found in the Quality Inn of Hasbrook Heights in New Jersey. Her hands were tightly handcuffed behind her back. She was beaten about the head and body, and again bitten on her breast, with traces of the white adhesive tape on her lips. She died of asphyxia. And for the first time, Cottingham's prints were found. They were lifted, I want to say, from her body, I believe. And her death was then at this point linked to Marianne Carr, who he left in the same parking lot. And then May 15th, 1980, May 5th, May 15th, Jean Reiner was strangled and her throat was cut in the historic Seville Hotel. And he cut both of her breasts off and posed them on the headboard of the bed and set fire to the mattress before fleeing the room. Yo. Okay. Like, are we fucking for real? And then I have the rest of my notes. I'll have the rest of my notes on my laptop. So give me 1 second. So as you can see right here, the progression is getting more and more and more. he had, this is that burnout that we were talking about, where he was going slow, and then all of a sudden it's like he just couldn't control himself. I think it was just, whatever it was too much. And he had to just like continue on with all of this stuff. So it is, okay, right? May 15th. And this is it. So it's May 22nd. Again, it's like, what? He picks up 18-year-old Leslie Ann Odell. And she was standing on the corner of Lexington Avenue and 25th Street. And at some point in time, she agrees here to have intercourse with him for $100. And around dawn, they checked into the same Hasbrook Hotel, or Hasbrook Heights Quality Inn, where he had 18 days earlier left Valerie Street's body. And I will say, like, it was a cleaning gal who found her. How traumatic. So at this point in time, all of the employees of this hotel are fucking weirded out. They're creeped out. They're scared. They're on high alert. And yeah. So he offers to give her a massage. This one he did not drug, and she is goddamn lucky. I say this because of what? She's lucky that he didn't drug her, because if he had that would have been the end, I think. So he offers to give her a massage, and so she rolls over onto her stomach, and then he straddles her back, and he draws a knife and he puts it to her throat, and he slaps a pair of handcuffs on her. This is where he begins torturing her. Again, trigger warning. And he nearly bites off one of her nipples. She would later go on to testify that he said, "You have to take it. The other girls did. You have to too. You're a whore and you have to be punished." End quote. Her muffled cries of pain became so loud that the motel staff, again, already spooked from the murder that happened there 18 days earlier, called the police. They said, "Nope, fuck that, 911. They called the police and then rushed to the room demanding that Cottingham open the door. So what happens here is that he doesn't open the door. He tells her to open the door. So he tells her to open the door. And he's like, "If you say anything, I'm gonna fucking kill you." Right? So she opens the door, butt-ass naked, blood from her almost bitten off nipple. And the staff, they're like, "Are you okay?" And she goes like this. And they're like, "Oh, fuck." So they run, call for the police. Again, they're like, "There's a girl getting fucking murdered. You have to get here." So they actually get there with a quickness. And he grabs his bag because he hears the sirens coming. So he grabs his bag and he starts to run down the hallway, when lo and behold, there is an officer right there, ready, and there's officers coming from the other way, and guns ablazing. Well, they didn't ablaze, but the guns out, ready. He drops the bag, and all of this stuff comes out. And it was handcuffs, a leather gag, 2 slave collars, a switchblade knife, replica pistols and a stockpile of prescription pills along with the fucking tape. Right. Right. So the charges listed in Cottingham's like New Jersey indictment include kidnapping, attempted murder, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, aggravated sexual assault while armed, aggravated sexual assault while armed. Okay, so one is the R word, and then the other one is sodomy. And then aggravated sexual assault while armed, fellatio, and possession of a weapon, possession of controlled dangerous substances, which was all of the things I told you, but this one was secobarbital and amobarbital and diazepam. So shit to knock you out. And then once he's arrested, no, that one's not it. So back in April of 1978, his wife started the divorce process. But it wasn't until his actual arrest that she like filed and got the actual divorce, because she was scared of him. She found his fucking trophy room. And so she ends up telling them, I think, with that. But following his arrest, they go to the house to do a search, and they find his trophy room. And also in the trunk of his car, they found trophies and they found personal items from some of the victims. So, good luck saying no. Like, where did you get this shit, dude? Okay? Where did you get it? Nobody could have gotten those things without. So it was during the 80s when he was convicted of only 5 murders. And then he had 2 separate murder trials in 81 and 82. And then a single trial in New York in 84 for 3 murders. He pled innocent, and for the next 30 years insisted that he was being framed until Dita's daughter. So Dita knew that there was no way that she would be able to raise her daughter, so she gave her up for adoption. And when Dita became of age, she went looking, or not Dita's daughter. When she came of age, she went looking for her mom, and finds out, tragically, that her mother had been the victim of Richard Cottingham. And then she finds this story about him and all of the information that there is on this and what he had done. That he murdered her mother, and she actually formed a relationship. She says that it's not, they don't have a friendship. It's not a friendship, but she formed a relationship with him and has since got him to confess and release information on, to date, I believe it's 8 other bodies, and they have been found. And finally, their families get some closure and get to know. And I have to give it to Dita's daughter for doing this, because what a person to go through and, find out that your mother had been murdered by this person, and then even be in the same room with him. And go and meet him all of the time. And she has done a really miraculous thing on giving these families this closure. And she is still, to date, from last that I saw, working with him to get more information on the countless victims that he murdered. And because of DNA now, you know, it's pretty awesome. It's said that he was forensically aware, and in that 13 span area, he committed 11 murders, was what they thought. But when I watched the this documentary, and I've read all this information, and like I said, rabbit hole and gone down, he said that it's well into the hundreds. It's 100 at least. He knows where a lot of the bodies are. He has still to date never released where he put Dita and Jane Doe's head and hands, which is pretty shitty, I think, in my opinion. But it's pretty great that at least with Dita's daughter that he has admitted and revealed 8 other locations of places where he disposed of victims. So yeah, that's the really fucking horrible story of Richard Cottingham. He is still alive. He has a massive white beard, and looking into this person's eyes, they are black as you would think a person who could commit this type of atrocities would be. His eyes are actually terrifying to me. There's not very many people who actually scare me, and I can't say that he scares me, but his eyes are terrifying. They're absolutely fucking soulless. And listening to some of the tapes and to watching some of the videos on him and his interviews, you know what he said is that it could, when he picked up a woman or they were in a bar or something like that, it could have been just a movement. It could have been just a movement that she made that triggered him, or something that she said or how she said it, and he was like, yep, you're gonna die. That's exactly what he said. Everything could be fine up until this one moment, and then she says this, or she said it a certain way, and I knew that I was going to kill her. And it was like, we're for real right now? That's exactly what he said. And I don't think, like, it was, thinking about it with his younger victims, you know, were not considered NHI. But as he got older, he chose sex workers, in my opinion, even though, like, he says that to his last victim, he's like, well, you're just a whore, you have to be punished. You know, like, did he say that as one of those things that if she did survive and get away, that it could be like, that was some reasoning, right? Or did he just truly go after them because nobody cared about them? You know, you had all of these young girls who were coming in from like Nebraska and the Dakotas and Wyoming and, you know, Minnesota and all of these places, right? Where you have these very young, very naive girls who have no life experience, especially in the big city. And you get to New York, you're fucking starstruck, and you get picked up by a pimp the second you walk off the bus, because they were apparently so easily spotted. It was like, oh, fresh meat, you know, and they would just swoop in. Hey, honey, where are you from? Oh, yeah. And some of them had run away, so they were runaways. They didn't have IDs. They didn't have birth certificates. They didn't have social security cards. They had absolutely no distinguishing identification on them at all. There were no ways to identify these people. See, with Dita, the only reason that Dita was ever even identified was because police got a mannequin, and they dressed it up in her hair, in what they thought could be her hair color wig and her clothing. And it was one of her friends that said, oh my God, that's what Dita left in. And that's the only way they identified her. Literally. But the other one was never identified. And they had no ID. So this wasn't only for them. This was for countless other people. And then, I mean, like, you talk about the homeless as well, and all of that, but a lot of the sex workers had they didn't have a driver's license. They didn't have an ID. They didn't have birth certificates on them. They didn't have their social security cards. They had nothing. Nothing. So, you know, it's amazing that some of these victims were ever even identified, ever. But there's, if you go back and you watch my episode on Times Square, there are countless victims, Jane Does and Johns. So John Does, Jane Does, across the country. You hundreds and hundreds of thousands, if not millions. No shit. And especially when you have that era of NHI being used. So some of that, I really do believe that's why he chose them, was because he knew that nobody would miss them and nobody would care. You know, oh, that's just a hooker. Throw it away. Yeah. NHI. Bottom of the filing cabinet. Who gives a shit? So it's the earlier ones that really blow my mind, you know, especially like the 13-year-old. Fuck. And then the girls, I mean, like, there was, I think it was the 13-year-old was coming home from band practice, or going to band practice when he picked him up. So I'm a boy. No, that was Jackie. Yeah. It's just nuts. And like, when you look at that as well, this is why I wonder if he started earlier, because 1968, '67, '66, he was really young. And like the 17-year-old, and the 18-year-old, and the 16-year-old, that's high school. And then Diane, at 23, and 68, he was 23. Like, that's what just makes me think about some things on when he actually started. And I'm really wondering if it was when he was in school, but I don't think we'll ever get those answers. I mean, it's only now, because of Dita's daughter, that they've been able to find 8 other victims. So yeah, this is a story that not very many people know about. It's not really widely ever talked about. There is the Netflix mini-series on this. It's okay. Dita's daughter is in it. You can see her. Dita's daughter's in it. They did an okay job. I wish that they would have done better. A lot better. But it's a pretty interesting watch if that's something that you're interested in. But yeah, it's pretty nuts. And I think it's what another thing that is really interesting about this is the fact that he claims to have killed 100 people, and no, Gacy, Dahmer, Eileen Wuornos. I'll cover her as well, but Eileen, who's the one from Seattle? Bundy. Like, all of these people killed a lot of people. But he claims to have killed 100. And it's like, what the fuck? He should be a case study as far as I'm concerned. Because there's so much to be learned from him. And I know how that sounds, but I mean, it's true. There's so much that can be learned from him. And when he actually started, was it high school? I think so. Dahmer started right as he graduated. So, anywho, that's the tea. I hope that you have enjoyed this. I had fun. If you have any questions, I'm happy to wait around for a little bit. I can answer questions, or if you just want to say something, that's cool. But I'm here. So I don't know what got me. Just like all of a sudden, something, it's this fall transition. Something has got me, and I'm like stuffy, weird. I'm finally getting my office put together as well. So this is nice. Just got the computer set up. Yay. I have my posters are in, and my calendars are in, and then my magnets are in, and I have one coffee cup. So today, when I'm done here, I have to go send out the ones that have already been purchased. And then I need to make my proper posts about it, and like the little ads and everything for them. But yeah, they turned out really, really good. I'm really happy with them. I'm really proud, actually. I'm really proud with how they turned out. It was pretty awesome. So so there's that. But I wonder, how do you like my backdrop? Well, it's not a backdrop. I made that. That took forever. It took an entire week to make. I have a couple little, not holes, but holes I need to fill in over on the corner. But anyway, anything to say, or are we done? I will give it a couple minutes, and then I'm going to shut down. No? Well, thank you to everyone who came in and, came in and out. Like I said, I really didn't plan very well on this one. I just was like, fuck it, let's do it. So I typically like to give like a week in advance before I do a live. And I also typically do not do a live on the weekends. I do them during the week, typically on a Wednesday, and typically about 6:00 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So that way people are home from work and they are scrolling, and, like, they can actually watch. So I don't do Saturdays ever. But today I did, and it was just like one of those things. So, alrighty. Well, have a very good weekend. Enjoy yourself. Be safe. Keep your eyes open and your head on a swivel, and pay attention to your surroundings. And yeah, I will talk to you later, Gator.